مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. لقد بدأ السباق. سيجتمع في هذا الشهر المرشحون الجمهوريون على المسرح في مدينة ميلواukee في ولاية ويسكونسن بقلب أمريكا لخوض أول مناظرة خلال الحملة لتحديد من سيمثل الحزب في المنافسة ضد جو بايدن في انتخابات نوفمبر 2024. حتى الآن توفرت لدى 7 مرشحين متطلبات الحزب لارتقاء مسرح المناظرة، كما يعمل العديد من المرشحين الآخرين أن تتوفر لديهم هذه المتطلبات قبل المناظرة. سيكون لهذا الحدث المهم تأثيرا كبيرا على كل شيء، بدءا من المواقف الشعبية وصولا إلى جمع التبرعات السياسية، كما أنه سيحدد نبرة المنافسة الجمهورية لشهور قادمة. من سيشارك في هذا الحدث؟ من سيتغيب عنه؟ هل سيحضر دونالد ترامب؟ ماذا سيحدث إذا لم يشارك؟ لمناقشة المناظرة الجمهورية الأولى وتأثيرها على الانتخابات الرئاسية، يسعدني أن أرحب بهذه اللجنة من المراقبين السياسيين البارزين أليكس جانجيتانو وأليكس ايزنستات وبيل كريستل. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. Amazingly, the Republican primary contest starts with a bang, with the first debate already coming up. Let's take a closer look with Bill Kristol, Alex Eisenstadt, and Alex Gangitano. All right, I'm going to say Alex Eisenstadt. Why now? Why Milwaukee, Wisconsin?
Well, the Republicans picked Milwaukee because it also happens to be the same location as where they're going to be holding their national convention next year. And so it's a natural place for they believe to hold their debate. And it's typical for the party to hold their first debate the end of the summer, right before the primary season gets underway. And so there are a lot of question marks here, namely, does Donald Trump choose to show up? He hasn't committed to attending yet, but you still have over a half dozen people who have qualified to attend this debate, Trump being among them, but he has not yet committed to saying that he will attend.
So, Bill, just for the benefit of our viewers, a debate like this, who sets the rules? Who organizes this? What are the rules?
Yeah, I mean, the Republican National Committee sort of sets the rules. The TV network that's hosting it sort of sets the rules. Fox, they'll have their own opinions about what will make for a lively debate and will get high ratings. I mean, it's important that people understand this is not a legal, debate, and this is not a debate that's established by statutory law or by, anything more than custom that there have in the last, 20, 30, 40 years. There have been primary debates, and they are run by some combination of TV stations, other media organizations, sometimes think tanks, and then on the Republican side especially, they've insisted that it be done in cooperation with the Republican National Committee. But it's very fluid. I mean, people talk about it as if this debate is, kind of, like a trial or something with all these rules and regulations and, decades of history behind them. But it can change. They could change. Trump could say, I think he will say he's not coming. He could also say later on that he'll only come if certain conditions are fulfilled. And interestingly, the Republican National Committee has, as I guess it's done the last couple of cycles, tried to insist that people sign a pledge to support the nominee. Now, couple of the Republican presidential candidates have not said they will support the nominee if Trump is the nominee. Chris Christie, that he wouldn't. Asa Hutchinson, I think the same. Mike Pence even is sort of tending in that direction after the January 6th indictment. I don't quite know. Will they just not sign the pledge? Will they sign the pledge and say it doesn't mean anything? It's a little it's pretty murky. So I think these debates are less set in stone than people sometimes make them seem.
All right, Alex Gangitano, let me ask you, there are certain requirements that candidates have to meet just to make it onto the debate stage. What are those requirements, and you know, who's likely to actually fulfill those requirements?
Yeah, so at this point, according to the party, you have to be polling 3% in at least 2 national polls. So, of course, President Donald Trump is polling much higher than that and much far above everybody else, but it's still unclear, as Alex was saying, if he will actually want to appear on the debate stage and take on these other Republican presidential hopefuls. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida at this point, should be able to make that. Vivek Ramaswamy, who has been polling surprisingly well and getting into that third position. He has some strong energy behind him, and I think Republicans that are looking for somebody different have been interested in him. And then it's kind of up for grabs on who else is very strong going into it. But of course, we have former Vice President Mike Pence, who should be okay, but there's Senator Tim Scott, there's former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. And so all those folks have been polling in the single digits, and hopefully they can get on the debate stage to make it a little more diverse. But yeah, at this point, without former President Trump, everybody else's numbers are pretty poor at this point.
Alex, sketch out what happens if Trump shows up, and then what happens if Donald Trump doesn't show up? Will they just have an empty chair and everyone take shots at him, or what is likely to happen?
Well, what would likely happen is you'd have a lot more people watching the debate if you were to show up than if you were to not show up. And so you can bet that Fox is making a really hard push for him right now to show up. Fox News is making a really hard push for him right now to show up. You know, they haven't really been clear yet the organizers haven't been clear yet about what the exact structure of the stage is going to look like, but it would be unlikely that I would think it would be unlikely that they would have an empty podium. But however, it would be up to other candidates to decide how they wanted to deal with Trump's absence. They could attack him even if he's absent, or they could choose to ignore him, or they could choose to go after or the next highest polling candidate, which in this case would likely be Ron DeSantis. So it's going to be up to those candidates to figure out how Trump's presence or not presence impacts and shapes their strategy for this debate.
So, Bill, in a bigger sense, Donald Trump, of course, has been facing unprecedented legal jeopardy, recently added to by the blockbuster indictment in the January 6th conspiracy case. How are other candidates approaching this?
Gingerly, mostly. Vice President Pence and Governor Hutchinson, former Arkansas Governor Hutchinson, have been pretty straightforward in saying this is kind of disqualifying for a presidential candidate, but the others are attacking the Biden Justice Department and so forth, part of the pattern of not being willing to confront Trump. I think Trump will not show up, just to go out on a limb here. And I think Trump thinks think of it this way. Are there going to be Democratic primary debates? No, because Joe Biden's the incumbent president and he doesn't care about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson, and he's under no pressure to debate. And the Democratic National Committee is putting him under no pressure to debate. Here it's a little different. The Republican National Committee has a certain stake in these debates, but Trump thinks he's the incumbent. And incidentally, he is in a way, right? I mean, he was the president. He has been nominated twice in a row. He's at 50% in the polls, and one other candidate is in the high teens, and everyone else is in single digits. So I think Trump's attitude is very much like, are you kidding? I'm not going to go in there and have the risk of a slip up when I'm 35 points ahead of DeSantis, and when he has, 99.999% name ID, and everyone knows everything about him, and he's not going to say anything new. I mean, so I think the degree to which we kind of want to make this a normal Republican primary, an open seat, interesting governors, senators, other people, but it's a little bit more when you think about it analytically. It's somewhere in between an open primary and a presidential reelect, really. I mean, we've never had this before. Former president, twice nominated in succession by his party, running again. But I do think that it colors Trump's own attitude. people like us, probably the media, think, oh, hey, let's have a debate. The more the merrier, it'd be more interesting, more exciting. Certainly would be more interesting, right, if Trump showed up. But I think he's correctly judges that his voters don't care. They don't think he's on the same level as Tim Scott and Nikki Haley. They're fine people and all that. They think he's Donald Trump. He's the only Republican to win the presidency since 2004. He's the leader of the party for 8 years. They don't think he has to go debate with some people who might be nice people and maybe should be vice president and maybe should run in 2028.
Fascinating. Alex Gadgetano, the conventional wisdom is that a lot of candidates only helps Trump. The more the merrier. They all divide up the anti-Trump crowd, and the more divisions, the better it is for Donald Trump. Do you agree with that assessment?
That's right. I think the longest they can keep these other folks, that's positive for Trump, because he can also show what he's running for compared to everybody else, or allow these other people to stay in the race and get bashed by the media or by Democrats. That's all positive for anytime the heat is taken off of Donald Trump. That's positive for him. We've seen Ron DeSantis going head to head with the White House on numerous occasions, often about these teaching standards in Florida and issues like Black history and slavery. And these are all things that President Trump has kind of backed away from and let Ron DeSantis sort this out with Democrats. And that's all positive for Trump anytime DeSantis has some culture war with another Democrat. And like you said, it also splits the vote. You know, if you're somebody who likes Mike Pence, you're taking away from Ron DeSantis or a Tim Scott. And with Trump polling so far ahead, he can let those people play it out amongst themselves. And then there's the issue of who's running for a potential Trump second term cabinet. You know, if Ramaswamy wants to be a Treasury Secretary, let's say, or vice president or whatever else, they want to stay in the race because they want to increase their name recognition. If Trump likes them, maybe he doesn't mind those people increasing their name recognition as long as it doesn't take away from him. And at this point, it hasn't.
So when we come back after the break, we're going to take a deeper look at how it is possible that Donald Trump is polling among Republicans, not just at 30%. Most people give him credit for having a strong base, but at well over 50%. What does that mean? Why is it happening? When we come back after the break. Our guests again today include Bill Kristol. Bill is editor-at-large of The Bulwark, an important voice in the Never Trump movement. One of Washington's leading traditional conservatives, he was the founder and editor-at-large of the venerable Weekly Standard. Also joining us is Alex Gadgetano. Alex is White House reporter at The Hill, where she was previously the Herd on the Hill and lobbying reporter. Earlier in her career, she was a staff writer for CQ Roll Call. And with us today is Alex Eisenstadt. Alex is national political reporter at Politico, an online news site in our nation's capital that is all politics all the time. All right, Alex Eisenstadt, let me begin with you. As I mentioned before the break, polls show Donald Trump with not just a lead, but a commanding lead, regardless of convictions in New York, regardless of multiple state and federal indictments. Nothing seems to dent his support among an unusually large segment of Republican voters. Why?
Well, I think there's two real factors here. One is that this primary, from a 50,000-foot perspective, is about is the Republican Party ready to move beyond Donald Trump? And at least so far, the answer to that question seems to be an unequivocal no, they're not. He still has a lot of support in the party, and he's convinced a lot of people, a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives, a lot of people in the party that the deep state, quote unquote, is after him. And so they come to see these indictments with a lot of distrust. They don't buy into it necessarily. Now, some people in the party do, but it's not enough it's not necessarily enough to stop him from winning the nomination. The second real factor here is that no other candidate has really been able to catch fire. There had been a lot of thinking early on that Ron DeSantis could be a really strong opponent to Donald Trump. However, DeSantis has stumbled throughout the early few months of his campaign, and he's had a hard time making the case to voters that he's someone who could be a really strong alternative to Donald Trump.
And so, Bill Kristol, you've watched Republican politics for 2 generations. When you see that Donald Trump is at more than 50%, not just a strong base, but really the majority of Republican voters, is this loyalty, or do they really think that Donald Trump is the best candidate to defeat Joe Biden in 2024?
I mean, they like him. They think he was a good president. If you look at the polling, they know that he won in 2016. People like us can sit around and say, gee, Trump kind of hurt in 2020 because he, did lose re-election, and 2022, he supported some not so great candidates in a few states. But if you're a normal Republican voter, who's won in your recent, if you're under 40, who's run in your adult lifetime? But even if you're under 55 or something like that, you probably don't have very fond memories, fairly or unfairly, of the George W. Bush years. And you think Trump's the one guy who seems to know how to do it, to beat all of them, the media and the liberals and all these powerful Democratic groups, allegedly. So I think those of us who are hostile to Trump like me, or who are observing from the outside, may just underestimate the degree to which Republican voters think he's the guy who took them out of the wilderness. He did it when they said it was impossible in 2016. He's sure running better against Biden here in 2023 than he was running against Hillary Clinton in mid-2016. So all these people saying, oh, I don't think he's the strongest candidate, it's just not obviously true that he's not. I would say, just on Alex's point about the primary electorate, I mean, the Republican Post of What Airs has a pretty good, I think, division of the electorate, which might just help people. I'll just quickly say, I mean, a third of the Republican Party is just totally loyal to Trump. So that's a good base to have, especially in a multi-candidate race, as Alex was saying. Another third is okay with Trump. They're okay with someone else too, but the default would be Trump, I would say. And Trump's getting about half of them now. So if you think about a third plus a half of a third, that's about 50, and that's about where he is. And then there's another third of the electorate that's either very hostile to Trump, that's a small number, 10, 12% probably, or another 15 or so, 20% who's kind of really would prefer to move on from Trump. And here I think Alex's point is important. I mean, if DeSantis, Trump's numbers haven't changed much. If you go look at the polls, he's always been low 40s to low 50s, basically, for the last 6-9 months when people have been polling the presidential race. DeSantis caught on at one point and got up into the about 30, I think. And it did look like it could become a real race. And I think that would have been a dynamic that would have been different. It sort of McCain, Bush in 2000, if you think of it this way. When you have a real challenger who takes off, it can threaten the front runner. Don't always beat him, usually don't, but can at least make it competitive. But so I think part of the story is Trump, but another important, not quite as important, but important part of the story is the failure of DeSantis. I think we would be having a different conversation today if DeSantis had just turned out to be a better candidate.
So Alex Gadgetano, let's take a closer look at that. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, started with promise, Trump without the baggage, as it were. Why has he had such a tough time connecting with Republican voters around the country?
I think there's a few factors here. DeSantis is popular in his state of Florida. He is issuing these, some might call extreme laws about teaching standards, a near ban on abortion, things that are very, very conservative, that on a national perspective are considered extremely conservative, whereas people in Florida might support them and his base there does. And these are also, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of issues that Trump kind of backs away from or allows other people to play it out to almost see how they would play on a national scale. So bringing these things that are popular in Florida out nationally has not boded well for DeSantis so far. He also doesn't have the charisma and energy, I think, of former President Trump.
Thank you, Bill Kristol, Alex Eisenstadt, and Alex Gadgetano for helping us prepare for that first Republican debate later in August. Thank you for joining us on Dakhel, Washington. There are a lot of ways to mark the official beginning of the presidential election campaign: when candidates file to run, when they announce how much money they've made, when they declare major endorsements, and so on. But there's nothing quite like a presidential debate. It's the starter's gun of what is now a 16-month race to the fateful day in November 2024 when our nation goes to the polls. Soon, a gaggle of Republicans will gather on a stage in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to face the media, themselves, and the voters. The party has detailed rules for who can participate based on the number of donors they have and where they come from. And so far, 7 have met the threshold, with more expected to meet the test before the deadline. That means the stage will be crowded with people, all men, just one woman. And that means that Donald Trump, once again, has the advantage. In 2016, when Trump faced more than a dozen competitors, he realized early on that the more candidates, the better. With a committed, hardcore base of at least 30% of the party who would walk through fire for him, Trump is perfectly happy to have the rest of the candidates divide the balance of the vote. That's how he won then, and that's his path to victory once again. For him, the more, the merrier. I try very hard to maintain a sense of distance and impartiality in our domestic politics. If you watch this show, you know that I celebrate the two-party system, a political framework that, despite some serious bumps and glitches along the way, has produced the longest period of democratic government in human history. And I believe each of our major parties has something unique to offer our political debate. For the past 75 or so years, that has been, for the Democrats, a sense of social justice and communal cohesion, reflected in such historic programs as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare. For the Republicans, a deep commitment to personal freedom at home and free trade abroad that has helped fuel the dynamism of the American economy and our growth internationally. For decades, the two parties shared a basic approach to American global leadership, though they differed in detail. The commonality and the differences were healthy. The system worked. Lots of reasons have come together in recent decades to see this system decay. No one person, no one party is to blame. But one cannot tell that story of decay and near collapse without a chapter devoted to Donald Trump. The fact that he now faces no fewer than 4 criminal investigations, 2 federal and 2 state, speaks volumes. So when the Republicans gather in Milwaukee, I hope they have a vigorous debate. I hope they explore the real issues that are plaguing real Americans, real issues like income inequality and the uneven emergence from the COVID recession, the urgency of America's global leadership, and how climate change affects Republican voters no less than coastal elites, not fake issues like which books to ban from libraries and which woke generals to purge from the military. And perhaps most of all, I hope they take a good look at the character of the candidates on that debate stage. Ultimately, as we have learned the hard way, character matters. بهذا نصل لنهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، سباق الترشيح الجمهوري لمنصب الرئيس، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاج Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل، وإلى أن ألقاكم شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.